Hmm. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome. Thank you for joining. This is my first interview, and I hope that you're excited to be able to share some of your background with us and some of your knowledge that you've had over the past couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me and excited to share. And it's an honor to be your first interview.
Yeah, so I guess just to get us started, would you like to give us just a little background and just tell us a little, I guess like a brief overview of your career and what you've been through?
Yeah, sure. So Ernesto Reza, I'm originally from Mexico City, moved to Houston, Texas when I was 10, and then from there shipped out to Boston to study mechanical engineering and entrepreneurship at MIT, class of 2013. And ever since I graduated, my career has had some pretty strong themes either around data, entrepreneurship, and lately e-commerce. So I joined a friend as a founding team member of his startup called Drinkin. If anybody's been in New York or other areas in the Northeast, Drizzly is similar. Basically, grew up online ordering for alcohol deliveries. We were bootstrapping that, so did that for about 9 months, and then as that money started to run low, I wasn't going to be able to pay me anymore, and so I had to find a new opportunity because I had some student debt to tend to. So then that's when I joined Accenture as a analyst in technology consulting. Quickly thereafter, got promoted to senior analyst and basically helped various different type of organizations. Um, with their data strategy, either kind of consolidating back office operations or upgrading their data systems to higher standards and so forth. Did that for about 2 years, then transitioned to industry. I joined NRG, or well, I went to another consulting firm for a few months, but that was short-lived. So then from that transition to NRG, which is an energy generation and distributing company. There I was in a rotational leadership development program where I did three different rotations. The first one was a rotation in the energy trading floor where I helped create energy demand forecasts using ML through weather forecast, like leveraging various weather forecasts, putting through ML models to then provide energy demand forecasts that the traders then would use to purchase and sell energy. From there, I went into the M&A and strategy team where I helped kind of expand some valuation models of energy generating assets that we are either looking to buy or sell. And also uh, got to um, help do some expanding of a model around a potential merger that was going to go on at the time. Didn't get to see it through because I left for my final rotation, which was in an operations team where through data analysis and data visualization, we would take two assets that had very similar profiles, but were operating drastically different so that we could do knowledge transfer through the understanding of the data. Um, from there, I decided that corporate life wasn't really for me. And it's when I started really diving deep into entrepreneurship. I was doing some freelance consulting and exploring different projects for about a year. And I absolutely love football or soccer. Grew up playing for 16 years, have been to four World Cups now. I was actually about to go to my third in Russia at the time in 2018. And I was gonna travel. I traveled for like a month and a half, and that was gonna be a big hit on my savings. So I was like, oh man, I gotta start making some money again. And so I was about to launch my own e-commerce brand around soccer and the World Cup. I had my Shopify store ready, designs, but when it came to manufacturing the products, I realized that the designs, and it was just apparel, I realized that the designs were um, a little bit too complicated for traditional printing methods. So there was going to be something more custom needed, and that wasn't going to align well with the timelines for when the tournament was going to start because it was like 2 weeks away. So I decided to put that on pause, and it worked out extremely in my favor because I got the opportunity to then joined an early stage startup, Thrasio, as the third employee. And what Thrasio does is they created this model called the aggregator model for Amazon FBA brands. And what they do is they go around buying existing Amazon brands, buying them and rolling them up into a portfolio. So I was the founding brand manager. I fully ran and operated the first brand that they acquired, which was a $2.5 million brand selling out of seven Amazon marketplaces, US, UK, Germany, and so forth. Uh, and did that for 6 months. But with this whole background in data and data visualization and all that I've had, started analyzing a lot of the existing tools and software that was out there for Amazon brands, and it became very clear early on that they were made with one brand in mind, not for this multinational portfolio play.
Mhm.
Start pushing on the leadership to bring it in-house. And 6 months in, I got the green light to transition to my role as head of product, where I was helping lead the vision and development of their internal reporting and automation systems. That by the time I left, we're helping to manage more than 65 brands and over $200 million of sales through Amazon. I did that head of product for about a year and a half. And with all those insights, being able to work with the department heads of supply chain, advertisement, and so forth, really got deep understanding of what it takes to succeed in Amazon and really what really are the key levers that drive e-commerce growth. And so with that, called on three friends from my time at MIT, and we started Mayan, my last startup. And what Mayan is a growth automation platform for Amazon sellers. So we leverage data, machine learning, and AI and automation to help Amazon brands grow. So we do that primarily through advertising optimization and then moving into inventory optimization. I led that as founder and CEO from inception all the way through Series A. Raised a total of $7 million from venture capital. Was part of the Y Combinator Winter 21 batch. Grew the business to over a mil in ARR in 14 months post launch. And uh, as happens in the startup world, sometimes founder differences can lead to breakups, and we're one of those stories. The company's still alive. I still have help at the board level, or was. And now I'm focusing on my new venture, and that you will find out about that a little bit more in the near future. We're still operating in stealth, and but basically blending all that expertise and experience that I've told you about with my passion, which is soccer and football, and looking to uh, make some really cool products with that.
That's exciting. Um, so you mentioned you went through the corporate life. You didn't seem to really enjoy it or seem like that's the life for you. And that blended itself to you ultimately going into entrepreneurship. But would you say that there's any challenges or opportunities through that corporate life experience that you had that helped you for your entrepreneurship path?
I mean, definitely. I think the what working at a large corporation can teach you is just uh, structure, processes, methodologies are key to helping an organization work effectively, right? One of the actually took a course at MIT, and the professor had done some really interesting research that startups are all about being innovative, being flexible, and it feels like you're in a constant state of chaos. But his research actually showed that those startups that have structure around them have higher likelihoods of succeeding. So I saw that during my time at Thrasio as well. Being so early on there, uh, you know, we got to unicorn status within 2 years. So that like the team, there was a point where like team growth really started accelerating. And what I started noticing is that we didn't necessarily have all of the best systems in place, particularly for knowledge transfer. So when someone new was coming on board, for example, a new brand manager, they weren't able to self-serve knowledge as easily. So there was a lot more kind of hand-holding from other team members. And so that's where, structure and processes and methodologies can really come into place. The other thing that, being in industry and like a large corporation like that can help is really exposing you to key problems that large organizations face. So one of the best areas to do a startup is B2B for enterprises, because you have large contracts that then can get you to 1 mil, 10 mil of AR very fast. So it's easier to identify those opportunities by being in those environments than being an outsider in. And that is, when investors or accelerators or anyone is really evaluating a startup for to fund it, you know, the key thing that they look at first is the team, right? Like they do believe that this is the right team to do it, and part of that is, for the founder or founders, do they have what they call founder market fit, which is how much experience or exposure do you have to the industry that you're attacking, right? So, uh, yeah, I think that's where being in industry can definitely add a lot of value of for anyone that has entrepreneurial endeavors. It just the only caveat is if you want to go into building for enterprises for B2B businesses.
Yeah. And so you mentioned how, I guess, the thing that investors and venture capital firms look for is people and that team themselves and making sure those are good people to invest in. But on the flip side of that, what do you look for when you were looking at investors or venture capital firms? And like, how did you go about seeking mentorship and going through your Series A and ultimately your further rounds of funding?
Yeah. At the end of the day, uh, behind any venture fund, what's really driving that fund is our people. And so it's all about relationships and creating relationships. So first, it's about creating a relationship with founders because and especially if you can create those with founders that are one step ahead of you, because they like and that are in your same sort of industry or space that you're in, because the best way to get in touch with investors is through other founders, particularly if they funded that founder. Now, in talking to investors, you made a really good point around like mentorship or basically trying to gauge, do I like how this person thinks, is their experience, their knowledge, and the way that they distill that knowledge to me going to be helpful. So in that relationship building where you're like, you know, ideally you want to start contacting investors, 6, 8 months before you actually have to raise. That way you have the time to get to know them in the process. As you keep giving them updates of how your business, your startup is progressing. You can also ask them, if you're looking for partnerships, hey, could you connect me to such and such company? Or if you're hiring, hey, we're looking for data scientists that have this profile. Do you have anyone in your network? And in you making those asks, you see how responsive they are. So the more responsive they are, it's a way of showing interest. So they might be interested in, funding your business in the future. But if you're asking more around like if you ask them any strategic questions or anything like that, you start to see how do they think? Do they bring up good points that help me think about it differently, or are they just giving me information that I don't really resonate with and I don't think it's the direction I want to take my company in? So that's how you are able to really start getting that mentorship or that guidance and really figuring out who is the right person. Because yeah, it's a two-way process, right? Like it's you interviewing them and them interviewing you because it's not only about the money.
Right, right. And I guess once you get that money, how do you figure out what to hire first and who to hire first?
Yeah. So I think it's actually backwards. Like when you go ask for money, you should have a very clear sense of like what that money is going to, and what that money is going to should be set against what milestones are you trying to achieve. So, for example, when we raised our seed for Mayan, we raised a total of 2 mil, including YC's investment. And we said that, well, with this 2 mil in about a year and a half's time, our main goal is to get to $1 million of ARR. Why? Because that's when the milestone that Series A companies looked or Series A funds looked for you to have in order for you to be lucrative as an investment. And so you start with like, okay, understanding I need to get to 1 mil of ARR in order to have an opportunity to raise at the next stage. And so from that, you work backwards. It's like, okay, well, where does my product need to be in order to be able to be selling $1 million worth of product? Who needs to be on my team to help me build that product, market that product, sell that product? And so those are discussions that you have with your co-founders or even early anyone in your team. Really depends on how transparent and how collaborative you are as a founder. Um, so with that, it's a looking forward and then working back from that exercise of like, okay, gonna need a one data scientist because we want to do this for a product. We need a full stack engineer that's more front end facing, and so forth. So it's really like understanding what are your strengths as the founding team, where are your
Mhm.
biggest gaps, and then how do you feel those to get towards those milestones.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. good way of looking at it. I guess going more to just looking at what advice you would give to the broader community or to aspiring entrepreneurs that are trying to navigate the challenges of starting, scaling, and especially I guess in the tech sector, what advice would you give?
Uh, um, to not get too caught up in the excitement of trying to do a startup just for doing a startup for the startup's sake, but to really understand, what are your motivators? What are the motivators of your co-founders? Where are you very well aligned? Where are you misaligned so that you can have those discussions early on how you would work through those misalignments rather than having them surface later on when you haven't even thought through them and you're in the chaos of building the business, hiring a team, etc. Because the other aspect of it is like about being very cognizant of where you're building it and why is that as much as you try to maybe remove yourself from the startup in your personal life or that you don't want your startup to become your identity,
Yeah,
um, you do a lot. Your life revolves around a lot in service of the business, in service of going to start. So, for example, with Mayan, we provide software for Amazon sellers. Well, that meant that I had to travel to conferences in order to meet more sellers to sell to, and who I was networking with were other people, selling to Amazon sellers. So even though I didn't necessarily want to be defined as like, oh, I'm just a software for Amazon business and this is what my life is. It does bleed into that. So, with that learning, that's why I'm also now focusing on my passion, which is football, right? Because or soccer. Because if for me, I need to go to the World Cup or to soccer games to find customers and connect with them, then that's easy for me. I enjoy that, no problem. I'll do that every day of the week. So I would mention that because they're long journeys. Like, I mean, if you hopefully make your startup a success, you're going to be working at it for 5, 7, 10 years, depending on your aspirations, right? So it needs to be something that you feel excited about working on each day and day in and day out.
definitely. I guess a question I have following up on that is, can you speak to any challenges you may have had like with your co-founders, with those founding people that you've worked with? Maybe anything like any misalignments or just anything that caused for any hardship in the beginnings.
Yeah. Again, there's a great book that kind of touches on some of these things called The Founder's Dilemma. But again, it's really what are your motivations individual and then for your co-founders and really trying to be really transparent and upfront about them, right? So like, is it the financial gain, right? I think anyone doing a startup has an element of that, but is there anything beyond that? Like, are you trying to have an impact with your business other than just like the financial gain? You're trying to improve your community, right? There could be misalignments in that. How you build your team. Do you want to have impact there and, be more inclusive, more diverse, give opportunities to people that might not really have it, or you just really focus on getting whoever you need to continue growing the business. And neither is necessarily right or wrong, but if you're not fully aligned in those things from the get-go, those things can start to surface down the road. So yeah, I would just really focus early on like motivations, core values, and how you want to like the team, how you envision growing the team and the culture. Um, and and I think a key one would be how transparent do you want to be as a founding team with the rest of your team? You know, there can be difficult situations, kind of life or death situations, if you will, for the startup that, do you let your team know that the dire situation that you're in, or do you uphold that information, try to really fix that problem yourself so that they can like focus on their day to day and not be stressed? So, uh, I think those are some uh, areas that can really test founder relationships. And another great book that I recommend around that is the hard thing about hard things. There's some great examples there around that.
Are there any pivotal moments or decisions during your career that have significantly shaped your style now to leadership or how you approach your businesses?
Yeah, and I think this comes really from before I actually started my professional career, but I grew up playing um, soccer for over 16 years. I played goalkeeper, and in my high school team, I was the varsity goalkeeper starting ever since my freshman year. And when my senior year, one of my best friends and I were named captains, and we walked into the locker room and we're like, oh man, the talent is not there like it had been in previous years. And I thought, man, there goes my senior season. Like, what a great way to end the year, my career in high school. But man, I was humbled, and I take that lesson with me to life, and about how I build my teams now in the startup world is that what we lacked in talent, we made up tenfold in chemistry. We really worked well as a unit. And so that's something I took to heart. And when I started building mine, and it's what I do now as I'm building my new startup, is that you're in a very unique position as a startup founder where you can find top talent and make sure you're getting the best of the best, but in doing so make sure that like they fit the culture that you're trying to build, because at the end of the day your first 10, 15, 20 hires are going to be your megaphone, your magnifiers of the culture that you help instill in them from the get-go. So really finding, not only are you the right person from a talent and skills perspective, but are you the right person from the team building perspective? Are we going to be able to work well as a unit collectively, and then from that continue growing the team? Because then, you know, many of your early team members might refer one of their friends or someone to join the company. So yeah, I would say focusing on team chemistry and culture is key.
Another question, if you could start from square one, say you just graduated from MIT, how would you change anything if you would?
Oh, that's a it's a hard question, right? Because every experience, everything that I've gone through is what has led me to where I am today. Um, but if I maybe could change something, is maybe just try doing a startup on my own earlier on. And I kind of let myself be dissuaded from it or discouraged from it at times, because like all of my ideas or the areas where I want to go in have always had a software element to it. And I myself am not a developer, so I was always so frustrated, like, oh man, I have what I think is this great idea, but I can't go and build it. And at those points, I could have really focused on bringing on a technical co-founder. Um, but I was also just really focused on finding that co-founder in my existing group of friends. And there's many talented people out there that you could find and work with, and then create a friendship through work. And there's great platforms like the co-founder matching platform for YC, that where you can find people like that. Or I mean, at MIT or any of these top institutions, just go to the computer science department. I'm sure you can find someone. But uh, yeah, I would just say like tried it earlier on. I thought that by joining when I was the third employee at Thrive, and I thought that was gonna like set me up for great success with mine. I mean, I did, but it's such a different mentality, and the responsibilities are so different when you are like the founder, especially like the CEO, than from like even being an early employee. That is just experimental learning is the best, and so just doing it is what yeah, I would maybe just done it earlier.
Okay. And I guess on the same vein, looking back on your entire career journey, what are you most proud of?
uh my perseverance and my grit, and just like, I definitely was growing very quick in the corporate path and career path, but I was just not fulfilled. I was just not happy. And man, I look like two and a half years in after graduating, I was making six figures, which is pretty decent. I know for any of you comp sci majors out there, that's like it's the moment you walk out the door, you're already there. But I wasn't. But man, like now I'm with the new startup I'm raising, like building. I'm paying my going to be paying myself nowhere near that, but the fulfillment that I'm getting from it is like unmatched. So, uh, yeah. Sorry, what was the question again? I was just telling you one of my,
Yeah, just what are you most proud of?
yeah, just that like, you know, having the resilience to keep trying at it, and it's a numbers game at the end of the day. With each thing that failure or whatever that goes wrong is just a learning experience, and it just makes you stronger, wiser for the next one. And I mean, um, Instacart recently, I think last year, went public. I forget, it was like his 30th something startup. And so that just shows that like if you keep at it, you know, eventually something will hit. And I think that's the toughest part, like the resilience, because it's not easy when the bank account is starting to roll low, really low, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I guess to tie it up, if you could give a word of advice in one sentence, to share with everybody, what would that sentence be?
Don't hire too fast. Uh, that's I have some friends from my YC days, and they were going a lot fast. I mean, they raised like a 15 mil series A, and like we're going to like 100 people, and we're both talking like we're now working on our second startup, and like that's the first thing we both says like, oh man, I'm gonna keep my team way more lean, um, because the lesson there is you as a founder, especially the ones driving the progress and stuff, like you have a clear understanding what you're looking to build, how you're looking to build it, why you're looking to build it. Um, but the rest of your team doesn't, and they're only as knowledgeable as well as you're in communicating that. And so the more your team grows, the more notes there are for them to misunderstand something or not get it right. And then if you need to pivot, maybe you brought someone on that like was going to be very a great fit for like the original direction, but now it's not as great a fit. So um yeah, I would say like it's a common misconception or common trap that more people will allow you to move faster, but it's not necessarily always true. And I mean, again, look at it like that's why large enterprises are sometimes that's why they're so vulnerable to startups, because as a startup, especially when you're less people, you can adapt very quickly, change directions. Whereas the larger organizations, like, oh, now we need meetings for everybody to understand, and we need to pass down decisions and so forth. So yeah, don't hire fast, hire slow. Hire
That's,
slow, and then if someone's not a good fit, fire fast. Protect your culture. Yeah.
that's great advice. Well, those are all the questions that I had prepared, but I have one more question for me personally. Um, I also love football, and so I was wondering, what's your favorite team and who's your favorite player before we leave?
Yeah, yeah. So as I'm from Mexico, my favorite team in Mexico is Cruz Azul. It's from Mexico City. Internationally or in Europe, Vizca Barça. Barça is my team. I just fell in love with them whenever Ronaldinho was there. That guy was a magician, and then now Messi. Rafa Marquez also played through there because he's a Mexican player. But in that, again, I grew up playing, excuse me, as a goalkeeper. And so there's also a special place in my heart for Juventus because of Gigi Buffon. He was a class act. And so, yeah. And I'm very excited for the next coming years here in the US with Copa America happening this summer, and next summer Gold Cup and the Club World Cup, and then the one after that, the World Cup. Oh man, it's gonna be a great time to be in the US if you're a football fan.
100%. I'm excited too. All right. Well, that's all the time we had for the interview. I learned
Sweet.
so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course. I have a couple more minutes. If I don't know if there's any questions from anyone in the audience or anything that we didn't get to, happy to.
Feel free if anyone has questions to drop them in the chat. Um, yeah.
Sweet. Well, doesn't seem like it. So, Andre, it was a pleasure connecting with you again. Good luck with the exams. I know you don't have any, so that's great. And for anyone, my name's I think you have my name on the invite or whatever. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect there. Yeah, so about getting into YC. So if you're thinking about YC, the first thing I would recommend is doing startup school, which is powered by YC. Um, Especially if you already have co-founders and you're doing it together, that is a way to signal to YC your commitment. That's kind of how we did it, not thinking about getting into YC, but just we wanted to learn and just obtain as much support and knowledge as possible. Then in the actual application, be very succinct. The less is more. So really focus on like what actually are you doing? How can you say that as succinctly as possible? Um, get someone to, if you know a YC founder, me, uh, they can recommend you, and that's also powerful in getting you in front of the uh, the team at YC. And it's all about like you really have to know your market. You really have to know your numbers. So uh, first, what they want to see is like, okay, who's a team? You know, is it a strong team? Is there a strong technical side? So have a CTO or someone that can develop, or if you're doing hardware, someone that can do the hardware or whatever, but someone that can actually start building the product. It's key for the team, or more if you have. Um, then are you in the right space? Again, that founder market fit. And then finally, is the market big enough? If you check those three boxes, then okay, you could be in the eyes, you could be interesting in the eyes of YC. And then from there, once you actually have the interview, again, it's all about knowing your numbers and knowing your information. So it's like the who are you building this for? Who's your customer? And being really, really, the more narrow you can be to start with, the better. Not like, oh, for example, we when we want to build for soccer. Well, there's 5 billion fans in soccer. That'd be great. It's like sounds like a huge market, but I can't serve all of those in Broadway. I have to start more targeted, right? So we're going after 18 to 34-year-olds in the US. So like that. Um, then so the who, the what are you building? Why do they need this? What is the problem? How are you getting it to them? So your distributional channels, and you don't need to know exactly, but just have a good sense of like experiments that you're going to run, or how you will get in front of your customers. And especially for B2B, they're really looking for like, all right, do you have a really good sense of who your customer is? Be really focused on that. Do you know how you get to your customer? And then how quickly can you get the product into their hands and buy it? And that essentially starts setting the foundations for them to start thinking like, can this be a scalable business, right? Because you want to have repeatable, scalable processes. So meaning I know how to market my product to them, and that was going to bring in some customers. Now that I have them, I know how to sell to them to convert them and make my sales cycles as much as possible. And I'm charging the right amount so that I get a return on my investment or that payback period on the CAC as short as possible. So yeah, that's what I would uh, really focus on, making sure you really understand your numbers. So again, when we did mine, I could tell you that like, hey, we're going after the 60,000 Amazon sellers in the US that are doing between $1 and $5 million. Uh, their profile usually looks like 3 to 4 business owners, maybe their high school or college friend, mom and pop. Um, they don't necessarily have the expertise in everything that they do. So maybe they're really good at ads, but are not very knowledgeable about inventory or supply chain. And it's basically was framed that like, hey, this is my customer. There are these many of them out there. This is how we're going to connect with them, and this is what we're solving for them. And so the more that you have a very clear sense and know those numbers off your back, then the better you look in YC's or any accelerator's eyes. If you're looking to pivot from the corporate world into VC startup space, what would be skills to home prepare yourself? to be prepared if any an opportunity appears. Um, I would say, oh man, that's a good question. I mean, I would say start training that like problem solving juice. And what I mean by that is like, you know, in your day-to-day life, as you're walking, as you're working, as you're experiencing anything, any frustration or problem or anything that you face, like think to yourself, okay, is someone else facing this problem? How many could there be? Like, what would be a solution? And not necessarily that like you're gonna come up with the right solution, but you're just starting to train your, it's like in sports, they say kind of like muscle memory, right? So the more I shoot, like if I'm a basketball player, right? If I take 100 free throws versus 1,000 versus 10,000, like you're starting to develop that muscle memory or that way to train your body on like how to respond to that. That's something you can do as an entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur as well. Is like, okay, the more problems or situations that I face, how could I solve this to build a business around it? How would I market it? How would I price it? How would I try to, distribute it? And it doesn't mean that like that idea is the one you pursue, but you're just starting to train yourself and your mind on how to think that way. And it's compounding. It's compounding interest. So like eventually, if you do it enough, eventually you just like it becomes part of like your essence, part of your the way you think. And yeah, that's the what the I guess hopefully that answers your question, Diego. Sweet. Well, again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's no more questions, Andre, thank you for hosting. It was an honor being your first interview. Hopefully you do keep this up. And like I said, if y'all ever do decide to venture into startup world, happy to help, provide support, connect to VCs and whatever, however way I can help.
All right. Thank you. I'll see you
Awesome.
later.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.